listening to the Pump Take Basketball Show with Marco Goldblatt and Kale Meyer.
Hey everybody, how's it going? We're back with another episode of the basketball segment on the Pump Take Sports Show. Today I'm here again with Marco, and this week we're going to be talking about the Phoenix Suns. They're a very hot team in the NBA recently, and they're winning a lot more than people expected them to. The Suns are currently sitting at the second seed in the West with a record of 45-18, and they're only half a game back of the conference leading Utah Jazz. So today, me and Marco, we're going to be just talking about the Suns in general and some key reasons for their success. So with that being said, Marco, do you wanna kick us off here?
Hell yeah, brother! I'm repping my retro Suns Nash jersey.
Yeah, that's a beautiful jersey
to represent. Thanks, man. Yeah, it's pretty sick. Fired up. Yeah, so the Suns, as you said, bro, I don't think a lot of people expected them to be this good coming into the season. I definitely didn't. I don't know about you. I think this seemed like something that kind of, I guess, similar to the Jazz, but for me, even the Jazz were a team that I expected to maybe take a step this year. But the Suns kind of, I thought they would be, maybe bottom of the playoff race, not second, and, pushing for first. And time and time again, a team with Chris Paul does better than we expect, but we'll get to that later. So I'll just touch on a couple things about the Phoenix Suns. So this year, as Kale mentioned, they're 45-18. And if we just take a quick look down memory lane, even last year and a couple of years ago, the Suns were really bad. So the Suns last year were all right. They had a 47 win percentage. And this year, with the addition of Chris Paul, it is now 71%. And even if you look back more to the 2018-2019 season, they went 19-63. And from 2015, so the 2015-16 season, to the 2018-2019 season, so 4 seasons, they did not win more than 25 games a season in any of those 4 seasons. So the Suns have had a rocky recent history. And I'm just happy for Suns fans that, those fans in Phoenix are enjoying basketball a little bit more. So I just want to touch on, before we move to Chris Paul, I just want to touch on really quickly some of the reasons that I think and that other people think that the Suns are doing so fantastic this year. And one of the main reasons is that they have an amazing offensive and defensive rating. So they ranked 7th with the offensive rating this year, behind the Nets in first. So that was, pretty
to be expected,
predictable. Yep, yeah. To be expected. And then they ranked 5th with defensive ranking, with the Lakers being first. And based on this alone, if you're an analytics believer, which I think most people are, of course they're for real. The Nets are for real. Or sorry, the Suns are for real. The Nets are also for real. But the Phoenix Suns are for real, and they are a true contender this year. And they have built a phenomenal roster. And another reason why they are so successful, in my opinion, is because their roster is so complete.
Just one thing quick that I just wanted to touch on that you mentioned earlier. And it just this just really speaks to just how much the Suns have improved this year. So with that win percentage that you just talked about, they won a total of 34 games last year. But you have to remember that 8 of those they went on that 8-0 run in the bubble, which before that they were a 26 win team, and that people were talking about them like they shouldn't have even been invited to the bubble. They ended up finishing 10th in the West because they went on that huge run. But for the normal regular season of that year, they were not a good team. They were horrible.
Yeah. And bro, I don't know if you remember this, but I heard talks about Devin Booker, he can never play on a winning team, or he will never be able to lead a winning team. And I think this year it's pretty clear that, that's just not true. Obviously, the hierarchy in the Suns this year, it does seem like Chris Paul is that top dog, and that's understandable. And Chris Paul is used to being that top dog in kind of whatever team he goes to. But Devin Booker is, he has this support that he kind of needs now. And I really like D-Book as a player. And I think that, Chris Paul and the team that is around, that the Suns have kind of built around Devin Booker is pretty phenomenal. I don't know if you have anything else to say about the Suns, but
Never really like real. It was never really fair to really criticize Devin Booker for that, because you can't expect any player to feasibly be able to just completely run a team when they just don't have a supporting cast around them. So I think this was just what we're seeing with the Suns this year was kind of just a natural progression. Like, Devin Booker's an excellent player. Now they finally have the pieces around him for them to succeed as a team.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's only one exception to that, the statement that you made, and it's the Cleveland LeBron. And it was like, what was it, like Dellavedova, JR, like.
Oh well, like that's not.
It was just that.
LeBron's LeBron, but
yeah, of course. It's just funny. But yeah, you are right. Other than that one like season, pretty much. Yeah.
And
yeah. Go ahead.
I think what probably is, in my opinion, the biggest reason for the Suns' success this year, and this is the main point of us deciding to do this video, as you know, is Chris Paul joining this team. And Chris Paul, he brings just a certain kind of intangible to any team he's on that he seems to just make them win. You look at the Houston Rockets, like, granted, before he went there in 2016, or before he went there in 2017, the 2016 Houston Rockets won 55 games. But when Chris Paul joined their team, they won 65 games. This was the best in franchise history, and it was a 10-win jump.
Dude, I have this in my notes as well.
Yeah. Like, they were the 3rd seed in the West before they went, and then Chris Paul joins them. They jump up to the 1st seed, and what stops them from winning the finals, or at least going to the finals, where they would have had a very decent chance, is probably the most just broken team in the history of sports, potentially.
And Chris Paul was injured as well.
Yeah, and he was injured in the last game.
Yep.
But the fact that Rockets team with Chris Paul, he allowed that team to achieve a ceiling that we had never seen them reach before. And when that team was at their peak, they were competing with the Golden State Warriors. And I think that it speaks to Chris Paul's veteran leadership. It speaks to how experienced he is as a playoff performer. Like, I think one of the big things that makes the Suns legit this year, and this stems from Chris Paul, is that he's such an experienced player that he's been through everything. He's experienced every sort of scenario that you need to be able to be the leader of men in a locker room, so to say.
Yeah.
He's experienced long playoff series. He's experienced playoffs in the clutch. He's experienced even something like being injured in that Game 7, where he needs to cheer on his team and he needs to try to lead from the sidelines. And I think that intangible sort of just leadership that Chris Paul brings as a veteran, it's even more so with him than other veteran players. And that's a big reason that I think the Suns are going to be for real this year.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, man. You see it time and time and again, his leadership and just that X factor he brings. And such a great example of this is, for me, is SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I still don't know how to pronounce his name.
Shai.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And you see this in the mentorship that Chris Paul provides. And Chris Paul is an interesting player because Chris Paul's 35, keep in mind as well. Like, this man is not a young player. He's 1 year younger than LeBron. And he's in MVP talks this year as well, which is pretty phenomenal. But the leadership that he brings and that X factor that he brings, he almost brings like his own culture to whatever team that he arrives at. And it's pretty beautiful to see, because without really, I was watching this interview with this retired NBA player that used to play with Chris Paul, and he was saying that Chris Paul is cut from this really hard-nosed kind of like fuck you cloth. Like, Chris Paul will say it how it is, and I think that's something that in the NBA, which is obviously softer nowadays than it once was, is something that these younger guys really respect. And this is something that someone like a Booker or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or DeAndre Ayton or whatever really just, Chris Paul kind of just exudes leadership.
Young guys, they kind of just gravitate towards the mentality that Chris Paul brings. And I always found it interesting that, like, even going into this year, it was especially when he left Houston, that before everybody just flipped on James Harden and just hated him, there was the narrative that Chris Paul was like a guy that teammates don't like him for some reason, or that he's like that he's hard to get along with. And I guess I can see where that comes from just because of how he is. But every single example that we have of Chris Paul stepping into a leadership role on a team, and he garners nothing but respect, and those teams overachieve under his leadership. So that's something that like I've never personally really understood exactly where that narrative comes from, that Chris Paul is not hard to play with. I think he's an excellent leader, and that's showing in Phoenix this year.
Yeah, I think to me it's like Chris Paul is the perfect example of a player that you want on your team. It seems like he's kind of hated by other teams and by other players on other teams, but he's loved by his own teammates.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, it gives respect. Like Chris Paul doesn't seem like a guy who wants to be loved or wants to be, desires to be liked. He just kind of comes in here and just almost, he doesn't even demand respect. It's just his attitude just kind of brings it. And what you were saying about him coming to Houston as well, it's not just Houston. It's Houston. It's Oklahoma City Thunder. Yeah. They made the playoffs, bro. They literally made the playoffs on a team that people thought would be the worst or one of the worst teams in the entire league.
I have it up here. Going into that season, that OKC team was given a 0.2% chance to make the playoffs by seeding guessing.
Smart people
that know the NBA, and they're they're correct like most of the time.
Yeah.
It's incredibly impressive that Chris Paul is able to come in and just take a team that's so young and inexperienced, and they didn't only make the playoffs, they were the 5th seed in the conference.
And they were better than the prior year with Westbrook and Paul George.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
Well, they might have not have had a higher ceiling for going far in the playoffs, but they standing wise they were.
They had a better win percentage.
Yes, they absolutely. And it's it's amazing to me just that time and time again, like I said earlier in the video, Chris Paul just sort of brings this intangible just experience to any team that he's on. And I think one thing for Phoenix that's really telling this year is how they've closed out games with Chris Paul versus last season.
Exactly.
Last year, in games that were considered in the clutch, which just for context is games that with 5 minutes remaining are within 5 points. The Phoenix Suns last season were 16-21. This season, the Suns ranked 3rd in win conversion for games in the clutch, and they have a record of 21-11 in these games. And I think that sort of just speaks to the experience of Chris Paul that I was talking about before, that there's no sort of defensive coverage that you can come up with that this guy hasn't seen before. There's no type of player that can guard Chris Paul that he doesn't know the type of defender that you are and how he's going to be able to either know when to take over the game and just play aggressively offensively or become more of a playmaker. And he's just so smart situationally just because of the amount of experience he has. And that just shows that Phoenix, because of that, with the ball in his hands, they're just able to close out games so much better this year.
Yeah, man. And I have the exact same stat here because I just thought it was something that just needed to be brought up. And this is not something that is an outlier just this season, right? Like last year, OKC, this, team that, people thought were kind of going to be shitty, right? Mm-hmm. They were the clutchest team in the entire league. They went 30-15 in the clutch, which led the NBA that year. And what you were saying is so true. Like Chris Paul is not someone, like when we think of clutch, we think of someone like Kobe, right? Who obviously was a clutch player, but he has the ball in his hands and he will do whatever he can to make an amazing shot. What makes Chris Paul so clutch is that, and he can go and score 4 back-to-back buckets in the clutch, in crunch time. And he's done that. He's done that this year. But he is such an incredible passer. He's a 4-time assist leader in the NBA. And he's such an incredible leader that he makes players around him better. And he's, he doesn't need to be that last person that takes the shot. You could have Devin Booker, obviously, has hit some clutch shots this year as well. Miles Bridges.
Mikal Bridges.
Bridges. And he can dish the ball out to these players. And I guess I was watching another video today. I forget what the NBA player was, but he was saying that the most points that he ever averaged in a season was 15 points. And Chris Paul played on his team. And Steve Nash played on his team. And he was saying, I'm repping a Steve Nash jersey right now. And he was saying that Steve Nash and Chris Paul have that kind of like factor where they just make players around them better.
Mm-hmm. They're elevators.
Yeah, they are
for everyone around them. And like you look at guys that are on the Suns this year that have really stepped into their own, and it just speaks to that fact. Like Mikal Bridges is having the best season of his career. Cam Johnson has really stepped up as a guy that's able to like hit some big shots on that team. And I think that a lot of that stems from Chris Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with Chris Paul that you were mentioning earlier is he's not like that prolific scorer. But I think that's because he knows he has the veteran experience to know when he needs to turn that on, and he turns it on situationally. You can't be, if you're just running out of gear, like you're just the guy that's going to just take the shot all the time. Teams are able to predict that, and then they game plan for it. But Chris Paul, he has the ability to be that guy that's taking the shot. But he also knows when it's time to kind of let off the gas a little bit and just be more of a gravity guy and then just distribute to his teammates. And it also helps Chris Paul that he has a guy like Devin Booker around him who, for most of his career, he hasn't been like a fantastic playmaker, but his strength is in his scoring. And that sort of dynamic that he has with Chris Paul this year works really well.
For sure, man. And I think that's another reason why the Suns are doing so well. They needed someone like Chris Paul on their team. I think Chris Paul was the perfect fit for the Suns.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Yeah, the Suns have an amazing roster this year. They are legit, and I'm loving that CP3 is getting some MVP talks.
Yeah, I'm loving it. I don't think he'll win just because of you know how the MVP
Jokic,
is. It's just like it's more of a box score thing than anything.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Chris Paul's never been like that kind of box score guy because of all the things that we said in this video. He's a great player because of that intangible element that he brings. But just to close out this video, what do you think the ceiling of this Suns team is going into the playoffs? Do you think that they have a chance to beat those top teams in the East and West in a 7-game series, like the Nets, the Clippers? I don't know about the Nuggets now. Losing Jamal Murray really hurts them, I think. But would you put the Suns in there with those teams that are often just considered the big dogs? Can they beat them in the playoffs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know in a previous video, me and you were we were actually talking about the Jazz in the video, and the conclusion that we came to is that time and time again in history, it's shown that to go far in the playoffs, you need a superstar. And I'm not saying Chris Paul isn't a superstar, but well, actually, yes. He isn't a superstar. He isn't a LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Luka Doncic. But I think teams like the Jazz and teams like the Suns, they are for real and they do have the potential. But I think each game they will need to play the best basketball like they possibly can play to close a 7-game series. And I think whoever it is, like the Lakers and the Bucks and the Nets or the 76ers, it's going to be an amazing series. And I think that if the Nets or the Lakers or whoever go into that series kind of expecting anything less than an incredible 6 or 7-game series, they need to give their head a shake.
I completely agree. I don't know if, despite how good the Suns are, I don't know if just because of history that you see the teams that make it to the finals, they've got that superstar player. I guess like even like the Miami Heat last year would be possibly an exception to that because Jimmy Butler's not really a superstar either by what you would consider a superstar, I guess, compared to Chris Paul. But yeah, generally I agree. I truly believe that they have a chance, but for them to have a chance, they're going to need to go out there and they're going to just need to play incredible playoff basketball for 7 games to beat some of these teams. But I think they can do that though.
I think they can do that as well. And last thing I want to mention is this year is so cool. The teams that are doing great, like it's fun. It's not.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's really fun.
Obviously, we expected the Nets to do great. And obviously, we expected the Lakers and stuff. But for teams like the Jazz and the Suns in the Knicks, like for these teams to step up and be playing really great basketball, it's fun and it makes the league more exciting.
It was a nice surprise going into this year, just because like everyone at the start of the year was just all doom and gloom, like, oh, we don't have any parity anymore.
Yeah,
The Nets
I
are like
know.
a super team.
Yeah.
And just like complaining about it. So it's a pleasant surprise that some of these other teams have risen up here.
Yeah, man. It's fun. It's definitely fun.
Yep. And with that, I think we'll wrap the video up. So if you're watching to this point, thank you for watching, and let us know in the comments what you think about the Phoenix Suns. Do you think that Chris Paul and Devin Booker can kind of, you see Marco with his Suns jersey there, can kind of carry this team into the playoffs, or do you think that they'll sort of succumb to teams like the Nets or the Clippers? Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
Goodbye.